They say an alpha's power comes from strength, from dominance, from the ability to break anyone who stands in their way. They're wrong. Kyle Draven ruled 17 packs with an iron fist for 5 years. His name was feared across every territory from the northern reaches to the Blackwater coast. His treaties held where others failed. His laws kept the peace when blood should have run in the streets. But tonight, as thunder splits the sky above Ironhold's stronghold, the truth walks out his gates in a rain-soaked cloak. He never built any of it. She did. If you want to see how an invisible woman destroys the man who stole her legacy, stay until the end. And tell us in the comments what city you're watching from. The rain came down like punishment. Leora Vance stood at the forest's edge, mud soaking through her boots, her hair plastered to her face in dark, dripping strands. Behind her, golden light spilled from the Great Hall's windows, and inside, laughter rolled out in waves. Kael's laughter, deep, confident, the kind that made people lean in. And hers, the other woman's, high and bright and utterly, sickeningly triumphant. Leora's fingers tightened around the leather case pressed against her chest. Inside were documents. The real ones. The ones that mattered. 5 years of her life, reduced to ink and parchment, but worth more than every sword in that hall combined. She should have been inside. Should have been standing beside Kael at the head table, the way she had for years. Not officially, never officially, but close enough that people knew. Close enough that she'd believed it meant something. Stupid. So incredibly stupid. Are you just going to stand there, or are you actually leaving? Leora turned. Mira Castellan emerged from the shadows beneath the watchtower, arms crossed, her expression somewhere between concern and exasperation. She was one of the few people at Ironhold who'd ever bothered to learn Leora's name, let alone use it. "I'm leaving," Leora said quietly. "About damn time." Mira glanced back at the hall, her jaw tight. "You know she's wearing your design, right? That dress. The one you sketched for the treaty signing 3 months ago." Kael had it made for her. Something cracked in Leora's chest, small and sharp. She'd spent 2 weeks on that design, had imagined herself wearing it, standing beside him as the pack signed the Concord of 17, the treaty that had taken her a year to draft, another 6 months to negotiate, and countless sleepless nights to finalize. She'd never even seen the finished dress. "I know," Leora said. "And you're still—" Mira stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Leora, he's going to invoke the doctrine of severance. Tomorrow, at the council meeting. I heard him talking to Ulrich." Leora's breath stopped. The doctrine of severance, an ancient law, rarely used, designed to erase someone from pack history entirely. Not just exile, true erasure. Their names struck from records, their contributions attributed to others, their voice legally silenced. It was meant for traitors, for those who betrayed the pack so deeply that even their memory was poison. "He's calling you a liability," Mira continued, her voice cracking. "Says you know too much, that you're unstable, that you might sell pack secrets to rivals now that he's—" She couldn't finish. "Now that he's replaced me," Leora finished flatly. "I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. I told the others, tried to get them to speak up, but they won't." Leora's voice was steady now, cold. "They never saw me. Not really. I was always just Kael's, whatever I was. The woman who handled paperwork, the one who made things work behind the scenes." Mira's hand found Leora's arm. "Then make them see. Fight this. You have allies. I have nothing." Leora met her eyes. No title, no position, no bloodline. Kael made sure of that. "I was useful because I was invisible. And now that I'm not useful anymore," she shrugged, "I'm just invisible." "So what, you're just going to run? Let him win?" Leora looked back at the hall one last time. Through the windows, she could see Kael at the high table, Seraphine Moorgrave draped across his arm like a prize. She was beautiful. Everyone said so. Daughter of the Moorgrave pack, powerful bloodline, political connections that stretched across 3 territories. Everything Leora wasn't, everything Kael had decided he needed instead. "No," Leora said softly. "I'm going to let him think he's won. There's a difference." She turned and walked into the forest. Mira didn't follow. Seb. 5 years earlier, the first time Leora Vance met Kael Draven, she was 23 years old and bleeding. Not dying, though it had been close. The raiders had come through her village at dawn, the kind of territorial skirmish that happened constantly in the borderlands, where pack boundaries shifted like sand and survival meant knowing when to bow and when to run. Leora had done neither. She'd been in the records house when they came, cataloging trade agreements for the village elder. The raiders set fire to half the buildings, took what they wanted, and left. Standard brutality. But they'd missed something. The records house had a second room, underground, fireproof, and inside it Leora had found something, proof that the raiders weren't just opportunistic bandits. They were being paid, directed, part of a larger pattern of destabilization that had been going on for months. She'd traced it back to 3 different packs, all circling the region like wolves around a dying elk, and she'd mapped out exactly how they were doing it: supply routes, payment schedules, communication networks. Everything. Then she'd done something insane. She'd walked 20 miles through hostile territory to Ironhold, the largest stronghold in the region, and demanded to see the Alpha. They'd laughed at her. A mud-covered girl with a satchel full of papers and a bleeding shoulder, demanding an audience. Security had tried to throw her out twice, but Kael had been there, passing through the courtyard. He'd heard her shouting. "I can prove the Razor Fan Pact is funding raids in neutral territories," she'd yelled as 2 guards dragged her toward the gate. "I have documentation, routes, payments, everything." Kyle had stopped walking. "Let her go," he'd said quietly. The guards had released her immediately. Because when Kael Draven spoke, people listened. He was 28 then, newly risen to power after his father's death, still consolidating control. But already, his reputation preceded him. Ruthless, strategic, unbreakable. He'd looked at Leora for a long moment, those dark eyes unreadable. "Show me," he'd said. She had. Within 2 hours, Kael had mobilized 3 strike teams. Within 2 days, the raiding network was shattered. Within a week, the Razor Fen Pact was suing for peace, their alpha dead and their territory absorbed into Ironhold's influence. And Kael had looked at Leora, still bandaged, still exhausted, and said, "Stay." Not as a warrior, not as a mate, not as anything with a title or a place at his side. Just stay. So she had. 3 years earlier. "This won't work." Leora looked up from the treaty draft she'd been revising for the 4th time that week. Kael stood in the doorway of what had become her workspace, a small room off the main council chamber, cluttered with maps and documents and coffee cups. She kept forgetting to return to the kitchens. "Which part?" she asked. "All of it." Kael moved into the room, his presence filling it the way it always did. He picked up the draft, scanned it. The Grey March Pack will never agree to joint border patrols, and the Silver Pine Pack won't accept the trade restrictions. They will if we frame it differently. Leora stood, moving to the map spread across her work table. Grey March doesn't care about the patrols. They care about looking weak. So we give them command rotation. Every 3 months, their people lead. It's symbolic, but it lets them save face. Kael's eyebrow lifted slightly. And Silverpine? The trade restrictions aren't actually restrictions. They're quotas. But quotas they'll hit naturally based on their current production levels. We're not limiting them. We're preventing the smaller packs from getting bullied out of the market. She tapped the southeastern region of the map. Silverpine gets to look cooperative without actually changing anything. Kael studied the map, then her. Something shifted in his expression, something that made her pulse quicken in a way that had nothing to do with fear. "You're sure about this?" "I'm sure that if we don't unify these packs soon, the Southern Coalition will move in and we'll lose everything east of the Crimson River." Leora met his eyes. "This treaty isn't perfect, but it's survivable. And survival is what we need right now." Kael was quiet for a moment. Then he smiled, a real smile, rare and brief. "You're wasted as an advisor, you know that?" Her heart stumbled. "I'm not an advisor." "No." He moved closer. "You're not. You're more than that." He'd kissed her then, for the first time, slow and deliberate and completely overwhelming. And when he pulled back, his hand still cradled against her jaw, he'd said, "I need you, Leora. Not just for this, for everything." She'd believed him. 18 months earlier. The Concord of 17 was signed on a clear autumn morning, beneath a sky so blue it hurt to look at. Leora had spent a year and a half building toward that moment, negotiating with 17 different packs, each with their own needs, fears, and grievances, drafting language that satisfied blood feuds centuries old, creating enforcement mechanisms that didn't rely on trust, because trust was a luxury the borderlands couldn't afford. It was the largest unified agreement the region had ever seen. It ended a decade of constant territorial war. It created trade routes, dispute resolution systems, and mutual defense pacts. And when the Alphas gathered to sign it, Kael Draven stood at the center of the hall, tall and commanding, and accepted their acknowledgement like a king accepting tribute. Leora watched from the back of the room. She'd written every word of that treaty, had negotiated every clause, had solved every impossible problem that arose during the process, but she wasn't at the table, wasn't even introduced. Kael had told her it was strategic, that her value was in her invisibility, that if the other Alphas knew how much influence she had, they'd see her as a threat. Better to let them think Kael was the genius behind it all. When things settle, he'd told her the night before, his arms around her in the darkness of his chambers, I'll make it official, I promise. But right now I need you to trust me. So she'd stayed in the background, smiled when people praised Kael's brilliance, corrected his errors in private and let him take credit in public. Because she loved him, because she believed that love and loyalty were the same thing, because she was 26 years old and stupid enough to think that making yourself essential was the same thing as making yourself valued. 6 months earlier, Seraphine Moorgrave arrived at Ironhold on a spring morning, surrounded by an entourage that included 12 guards, 4 advisors, and enough luggage to supply a small army. Leora had been in Kael's study when the messenger announced her arrival. The Moorgrave Alpha's daughter? Kael had looked up from the dispatch he'd been reading, one of Leora's summaries, though of course his name would be on it when it went out. What's she doing here? Diplomatic visit, apparently. Leora sorted through the morning's correspondence. The Moorgrave Pack wants to discuss expanding the Concord to include the Western Territories. It's a good opportunity. If we can bring them in, that's another 4 packs under the unified agreement. Kael had nodded slowly. Set up a formal dinner, tonight. I want to make a good impression. Of course. She'd organized everything, the menu, the seating arrangements, the talking points for Kael to use during the negotiation. She hadn't realized she was organizing her own replacement. Seraphine was impressive. Leora could admit that. Beautiful, yes, but more than that. Educated, well-spoken, connected. The kind of woman who commanded attention the moment she entered a room. The kind of woman who looked right standing next to an alpha. Leora had watched them that first night, Kael and Seraphine at the head table, deep in conversation about territorial politics and trade agreements. Seraphine laughed at his jokes, touched his arm when she made a point, leaned in close when the hall grew loud. And Kael looked at her the way he used to look at Leora, like she was the most interesting thing in the room. You're staring, Mira had murmured beside her. Leora had looked away. I'm observing. You're torturing yourself. Maybe. But she'd told herself it was fine. Seraphine would leave in a few days. The diplomatic visit would end. Things would go back to normal. Except Seraphine didn't leave. 3 months earlier. We need to talk. Kael didn't look up from the map he was studying. It was late, past midnight, and Leora had spent the last 6 hours drafting a response to a border dispute between 2 of the conquered packs. She was exhausted, but this couldn't wait. Leora, not now. Yes, now. She moved into his study, closing the door behind her. Seraphine's been here for 3 months. Her diplomatic visit was supposed to last a week. Plans changed. Plans changed, or you changed them. Finally, Kael looked up. His expression was carefully neutral. Is there a problem? You're sleeping with her. The words hung in the air between them. Kael didn't deny it, didn't apologize, just held her gaze. The Moorgrave alliance is important, he said quietly. You know that. You're the one who said we needed to expand the Concord westward. So you're using her. I'm building something that will last. Kael's voice hardened. You of all people should understand that. Sometimes personal feelings have to come second to strategy. Lior's laugh was bitter. Personal feelings, is that what we are now? Liora, I've given you 5 years, Kael, 5 years of my life. I've built everything you have, every treaty, every law, every alliance that keeps this region from tearing itself apart. That was me. And you're telling me it's just strategy? Kael stood, moving around the desk. For a moment, she thought he might reach for her, might say something that would make this hurt less. Instead, he said, "You knew what this was. I never promised you anything." The words hit like a physical blow. "You said you needed me," Liora whispered. "I do." Kael's expression softened, just slightly. "You're invaluable, Liora. No one understands these systems the way you do. No one can negotiate like you can. But Seraphine, she brings things you can't. Political connections, bloodline legitimacy, the kind of visibility that makes other alphas take us seriously." Visibility. Liora's voice was hollow. "Right, because I'm just the invisible woman who does the work." "That's not what I meant." "Yes, it is." She stepped back. "It's exactly what you meant. I'm useful because I'm invisible. And now that you need something else, someone else," she swallowed hard. "I'm disposable." "You're not disposable. You're still part of this. You'll still—" "What? Work in the background while you parade her around as your mate?" Liora shook her head. "No, I'm done." Kael's expression went cold. "Done? I'm leaving, tomorrow. You can have Seraphine handle your treaties from now on." "Liora." His voice dropped to that low, dangerous register that made lesser people flinch. "You don't want to do this." "Actually, I really do." She'd turned to leave, made it 3 steps toward the door. Then Kael said, "If you walk out that door, don't come back." Liora stopped, looked back at him. "Is that a threat?" "It's a fact. You leave, you lose access to everything. All the work you've done, all the systems you've built, they stay here. They're pack property. You signed the confidentiality agreements. You know the terms." She had signed them, years ago, before she understood what they really meant. "So I'm trapped," she said quietly. "You're protected. There's a difference." Kael moved closer. "Stay. Keep doing what you do. You'll still have your work. You'll still be—" "What? Your dirty little secret? The woman who built your empire while your real mate gets the credit?" Liora's voice cracked. "I deserve better than that." "You deserve what you've earned." Kael's expression was unreadable. "And you've earned a place here. Don't throw it away over jealousy." Jealousy. He thought this was jealousy. Liora had walked out then. Not because she'd won the argument, she hadn't, but because if she stayed another second, she'd do something she'd regret. Like tell him the truth, that every system he relied on, every document he thought he controlled, had one critical vulnerability. Her term goal. Now. The rain had soaked through Liora's cloak by the time she reached the river crossing. Her hands were numb, her feet ached, but she didn't stop. Behind her ironhold was a distant glow against the storm-dark sky. Ahead, the forest stretched out in shadow and silence. And in her arms, pressed tight against her chest, was the leather case. Inside it, carefully wrapped in oilcloth, were the documents that made Kael Draven's empire function. Not copies. The originals. The treaty drafts with all her annotations. The enforcement protocols. The communication networks. The carefully maintained relationships with key figures in every pack. The leverage points. The vulnerabilities. Everything. Seraphine would find the copies in Liora's workspace tomorrow morning. Perfect, flawless copies. With one critical difference. They were written in a cipher. Liora's cipher. One she'd developed over the past 3 months, embedding it so gradually, so carefully, that no one had noticed. The documents looked normal, read normal, but the critical details, the ones that actually made the systems work, were hidden, encoded. Without her, they were worthless. Without her, Kael's entire empire was built on paper he couldn't even read. Liora smiled as she crossed the river, the current pulling at her boots. Let him invoke the doctrine of severance. Let him erase her name from his records. She was already gone, and she'd taken everything that mattered with her. The safe house was smaller than Liora remembered. She'd found it 2 years ago during a supply run to the Eastern Territories, an abandoned hunter's cabin, half collapsed but still standing, tucked into a ravine where the forest grew thick enough to hide smoke. She'd filed the location away in her mind, the way she filed away everything potentially useful, a habit that had kept her alive in Kael's world. Now, as she pushed open the warped door and stepped into the musty darkness, that habit felt less like paranoia and more like providence. The leather case hit the table with a wet slap. Leora's hands were shaking, from cold, from exhaustion, from the adrenaline finally draining out of her system. She'd walked for 6 hours through the storm. Her boots were ruined, her cloak was plastered to her shoulders, and somewhere behind her morning was coming to Ironhold. They'd find her workspace empty, find the decoy documents, and then the door slammed open. Leora spun, hand going to the knife at her belt, heart hammering. Mira stood in the doorway, soaked and breathing hard. "You absolute idiot! How did you told me about this place 2 years ago, after you negotiated the Grey March Treaty and got drunk on bad whiskey." Mira stepped inside, shoving the door closed. "You said, and I quote, 'If I ever need to disappear, there's a shithole in the eastern ravines that even the trackers won't find.'" Leora's throat tightened. "I don't remember that. You were very drunk." Mira moved to the fireplace, started pulling down the old kindling someone had left decades ago. "Also, you cried about Kael for an hour and made me promise never to let you settle for someone who didn't see you. So, here we are." "Mira, don't." Mira's voice cracked. "Don't tell me to go back. Don't tell me it's safer. I just watched you walk away from 5 years of your life with nothing but a bag of papers. And if you think I'm leaving you alone out here, you're even dumber than Kael thinks you are." The words hit harder than they should have. Leora sank onto the rickety bench, suddenly too tired to stand. "He's going to come after you. Let him." Mira got a spark, nursed it into flame. "I'm nobody, just another guard. He'll barely notice I'm gone." You're more than that." "To you, maybe." Mira sat back on her heels, watching the fire catch. "To Kael? I'm furniture, same as you were." The truth of it settled between them. Outside, the rain was letting up, the storm moving east. Inside, the fire threw shadows across walls that hadn't seen light in years. Leora opened the leather case. The documents were still dry, still perfect. 5 years of work reduced to paper and ink. "What now?" Mira asked quietly. "Now?" Leora spread the first treaty across the table. "Now I make sure he can't use any of this without me." "I thought you already did that. The cipher thing." "That buys me time. Maybe a week before someone figures out the documents are compromised. But time isn't enough." Leora pulled out a second stack, communications logs, carefully annotated. "I need leverage, real leverage. The kind that makes running after me more expensive than letting me go." Mira leaned over the table, scanning the documents. These are correspondence records between Kael and the other Pack Alphas. Every letter, every message, every negotiation for the past 5 years. Leora's finger traced a line of text, including the ones that weren't exactly legal. Mira's eyes widened. "He's going to kill you." "Only if he finds me." Leora met her gaze. "And by the time he does, I'll have already sent copies to every Alpha in the Concord. Let them see how their brilliant, trustworthy leader actually operates." Leora, that's declaring war." "No." Leora's smile was cold. "War is what happens when both sides have something to lose. This is just making sure I'm too dangerous to touch." The fire crackled. Mira was quiet for a long moment, then she said, "You're going to need help." "I know. And by help, I mean you're going to need allies, real ones, not just me and a pile of potentially treasonous documents." Leora had already thought about that, had spent the 6-hour walk through the rain thinking about exactly that. There was only one place she could go, one alliance that might take her in, might see her value instead of just her lack of title. The problem was getting there alive. "The Thornhaven Coalition," Leora said quietly. Mira stared at her. "You're joking. Do I look like I'm joking? Thornhaven is 300 miles north, through hostile territory. passed at least 4 packs that would love to hand you back to Kyle for the reward he's definitely going to post. Mira stood, pacing the small space. Not to mention Thornhaven and Ironhold have been on the edge of conflict for years. They're not going to just welcome you with open arms. They will if I offer them something they need, which is me. Leora pulled out another document. This one a detailed map of the conquered territories, marked with trade routes, resource deposits, and strategic vulnerabilities. Thornhaven has been trying to break into the southern markets for years. Kyle's kept them boxed in with tariffs and territorial agreements they can't navigate. But I wrote those agreements. I know every loophole, every weak point, every piece of leverage they'd need to gain equal footing. Mira looked at the map, then at Leora. You're going to sell out Kyle's entire operation. I'm going to offer Thornhaven what they've wanted for years. Access, legitimacy. A seat at a table Kyle's kept them away from. Leora's voice was steady. In exchange, they give me sanctuary, protection, and most importantly, a platform. A platform for what? For making sure everyone knows who really built Kyle Draven's empire. The fire popped. Outside, dawn was breaking through the clouds, pale and cold. Mira sat down slowly. This is insane. I know. You could die. I know that too. And you're doing it anyway. Leora looked at her friend, one of the only real friends she'd ever had. 5 years, Mira. 5 years I spent making him powerful, making him respected, building something I thought we'd share. Her voice didn't shake. And the second I wasn't useful anymore, he threw me away. Worse, he tried to erase me, like I never existed, like everything I did never mattered. It mattered. Not to him. Leora's hands flattened on the table. So yes, I'm going to Thornhaven. I'm going to give them everything they need to challenge Kyle's control. And I'm going to make sure that when this is over, everyone knows exactly who built what. Mira was quiet. Then she nodded once. Okay. Okay? Okay. We're going to Thornhaven. Mira stood. But we're doing it smart. No main roads, no towns where Kyle has connections. And we're leaving tonight because by tomorrow morning this place won't be safe anymore. Leora felt something unknot in her chest. You don't have to. Yes, I do. Mira's expression was fierce. You said I was more than furniture. Time to prove it. They spent the day preparing. Mira had brought supplies, dried food, medical kit, extra clothing she'd stolen from the barracks. Leora sorted through the documents, choosing which ones to take, which ones to hide. The original treaties stayed. The correspondence logs came with her. And the map, the beautiful damning map that showed exactly how Kyle controlled the region, that got wrapped in oilcloth and buried beneath the floorboards. Insurance. By the time the sun set, they were ready. Leora had changed into dry clothes, eaten something that might charitably be called a meal, and packed everything essential into a pack that wouldn't slow her down. 300 miles, Mira said, checking her weapons one last time. If we push, we can make it in 2 weeks. We'll need to avoid the Razorfen territory and the Silver Pine border patrols, and anywhere Kyle might have sent word ahead. Mira grinned, sharp and reckless. So basically everywhere. Basically, they left as full dark settled over the forest. No fire, no light. Just 2 women and a dangerous set of secrets, heading north into territory that wanted them dead. The first 3 days were the worst. Not because of danger, though danger was everywhere, constant and exhausting, but because Leora couldn't stop replaying that last conversation with Kyle, couldn't stop hearing his voice. You deserve what you've earned. She'd earned everything, and he'd taken it all anyway. On the 4th day, they reached the Widow's Pass, a narrow canyon that cut through the mountains, saving them 50 miles, but exposing them to anyone watching from above. We should go around, Mira said, eyeing the cliffs. That adds 3 days. Better than being target practice for Grey March scouts. Leora studied the pass. Narrow, exposed, dangerous. But 3 extra days meant 3 more days for Kyle to mobilize, to send hunters, to lock down the routes north. We go through, she decided. Mira muttered something unflattering but followed. They were halfway through the pass when the first arrow hit. It buried itself in the rock 6 inches from Leora's head, the impact sending stone chips flying. She dropped, instinct taking over, and Mira was already moving, shoving her toward an outcropping. "Contact left!" Mira's voice was clipped, professional. "2 shooters, maybe 3. Another arrow, this one closer. Leora's mind raced. The pass was a kill funnel. Whoever was up there had high ground, cover, and all the time in the world. She and Mira had rocks and rapidly diminishing options. "We need to move," Leora said. "Move where? We're pinned." A voice echoed down from the cliffs. Male. Amused. "Leora Vance, Kyle Draven sends his regards." Leora's blood went cold. Mira's expression was grim. "How much is he paying them?" "Does it matter?" "Might help us negotiate." "We're not negotiating?" Leora pulled out the documents she'd brought. Not all of them, just the ones she could spare. "How good's your arm?" "What?" "Your throwing arm. How good is it?" Mira stared at her. "You want me to throw papers at armed mercs?" "I want you to make them think twice about who they're working for." Leora scrawled something across the top document. An address, coordinates, a promise. "These are Kyle's private correspondence logs. Proof he's been manipulating the Concord agreements for his own benefit. Anyone who gets their hands on this could cause him serious problems." She wrapped the documents around a rock, tied them tight. "When I say go," Leora continued, "you throw this as far up the pass as you can, toward the exit. They'll just shoot us. They'll hesitate, because if they kill us, they don't know if we have more copies hidden. If those documents get out..." Leora met Mira's eyes. "KL's in more trouble than we are." It was a gamble, a stupid, desperate gamble. Mira grinned. "I really hope you know what you're doing." "I really don't." "Go!" Mira stood, arm whipping forward, and the makeshift bundle sailed up and over, landing 50 feet away in a scatter of paper and rock. The shooting stopped. Leora counted 3 seconds. Then she ran. Mira was right behind her, both of them sprinting for the narrow end of the pass, feet hammering stone. Arrows fell around them. 2, 3, 1, so close Leora felt the wind of it, but they were moving, fast and unpredictable. And then they were through, tumbling out the far side into the relative safety of the forest beyond. Behind them, voices shouted, arguing. Someone had grabbed the documents. "Will that actually work?" Mira gasped, breathing hard. "Maybe." Leora pulled her to her feet, already moving deeper into the trees. "Or maybe it just bought us 20 minutes. Either way, we need to be gone before they decide it's not worth the risk." They ran until the canyon was far behind them, until the forest grew thick enough to hide in, until Leora's lungs burned and her legs threatened to give out. Finally, Mira called a halt. They collapsed against a fallen log, gasping. "That was insane," Mira said. "I know. We could have died." "I know. And you didn't even bring the important documents." Leora managed a weak smile. "Those were copies. The real correspondence logs are still in my pack." Mira started laughing, exhausted, half-hysterical laughter that Leora couldn't help but join. They sat there in the growing dark, 2 women who'd just outrun professional killers with nothing but bluff and speed. "Kale's going to be furious," Mira said finally. "Good. He's going to send more." "I know." Leora stood, wincing at the pain in her legs. "Which means we need to move faster." They traveled for 6 more days, bypassing towns, avoiding roads, sleeping in shifts, and moving at night when the terrain allowed. Twice more they encountered hunters, people Kale had hired or people looking for the reward he'd undoubtedly posted. Both times Leora and Mira slipped away before contact could be made. But it was close. Too close. On the 10th day they reached the Thornhaven border. It wasn't marked with signs or fences, just a subtle shift in the forest, the trees growing older, the underbrush thicker. And standing at the edge of a clearing, waiting, was a woman Leora had only seen once before. Commander Elara Thorne. Second in command of the Thornhaven Coalition, and one of the most dangerous people in the Northern Territories. She was tall, dark-skinned, with close-cropped hair and eyes that missed nothing. 24 armed soldiers stood behind her, spread out in a loose perimeter. Leora stopped walking. Mira's hand went to her weapon. "Easy," Elara said, her voice carrying easily across the clearing. "If we wanted you dead, you'd already be bleeding." "Comforting," Leora replied. "Practical." Alara's gaze flicked between them. Leora Vance, we've been expecting you. How? You dropped very interesting documents in the Widow's Pass. The mercs who found them decided selling information to us was more profitable than killing you for Kael. Alara smiled. Smart play, by the way. Risky, but smart. Leora's mind raced. The correspondence logs are fascinating reading. Alara pulled a folded paper from her jacket. Kael Draven manipulating trade agreements, bribing neutral alphas, using conquered resources for personal gain. She tucked the paper away. You built quite the empire for him. Shame he didn't appreciate it. He appreciated what I could do for him. Leora kept her voice level. Not who I was. Men like Kael rarely do. Alara gestured. Walk with me. Your friend stays here with my people. Nothing personal, just protocol. Mira started to protest, but Leora touched her arm. It's fine. I'll be back. She followed Alara into the trees, acutely aware of the soldiers watching their every move. They walked in silence for several minutes before Alara spoke again. You're asking for sanctuary. I'm offering a trade. Same thing in my experience. Alara stopped beside a stream, watching the water run over stones. You want protection from Kael. We want leverage against the conquered. You have information we need. We have resources you need. Tidy arrangement. Then we have a deal. Not quite. Alara turned to face her. Because there's a problem, Leora. A significant one. Leora's stomach dropped. Which is? You're a ghost. No title. No bloodline. No formal authority. Alara's expression was sympathetic but firm. The information you have is valuable, but information without credibility is just gossip. And right now you're nobody. A scorned advisor with an axe to grind against her former alpha. I'm the person who built. I know what you built. I've seen the evidence, but proving it? Alara shook her head. That's harder. Kael will deny everything. Say you're lying, that you stole credit for his work. And without proof, real, undeniable proof, it's your word against an alpha who controls 17 packs. The words were a knife to the gut. Because Alara was right. Leora had been invisible for so long, had let Kael take credit for so long, that now when it mattered most, she couldn't prove anything. Then what do you want from me? Leora asked quietly. The same thing you want from us. Legitimacy. Alara's gaze was steady. You help us break Kael's stranglehold on the southern trade routes. Give us the leverage we need to challenge his authority. And in return, we give you a platform. A voice. Recognition. And if I refuse? Then you're on your own. Against Kael. Against his hunters. Against everyone who thinks turning you in is worth the reward. Alara's voice softened, just slightly. I'm not trying to be cruel, Leora. I'm trying to be honest. You're valuable. But value alone isn't enough to survive what's coming. Leora looked at the stream, watching the water flow endlessly forward. She thought about Kael, about 5 years of work stolen and claimed, about being erased, made invisible, made nothing. What do you need me to do? She asked. Alara smiled. First, prove you're worth the risk. The Conquered Council meets in 2 weeks. Kael will be there, along with every alpha in the Alliance. He'll use that meeting to consolidate power, to paint you as a traitor, to make sure no one questions his authority. And we're going to make sure you're there too, in front of everyone, where he can't silence you. Alara's expression was fierce. You're going to stand in front of the council and tell them exactly who built Kael Draven's empire, and you're going to prove it in a way they can't ignore. They'll never let me speak. They will if you have something they can't dismiss. Alara reached into her jacket again, pulled out a second paper. This is a formal motion to audit the Concord agreements. Every treaty, every trade arrangement, every enforcement mechanism. Thornhaven is calling for complete transparency. Leora's breath caught. An audit would expose everything, every manipulation, every hidden advantage Kael's been exploiting. Alara held out the paper. And you're going to be the one conducting it, publicly, with every alpha watching. It was brilliant. Terrifying, but brilliant. An audit would force Kael to produce the original documents, the ones Leora had already compromised. He'd have to either admit he couldn't read his own systems or forge new documents and risk someone noticing the inconsistencies. Either way, His authority would crack. "He'll fight this," Leora said. "Of course he will, which is why you need to be ready." Alara's hand came down on Leora's shoulder, firm and steady. 2 weeks. That's all the time we have to prepare. Can you do this? Leora thought about the leather case still strapped to her back, about 5 years of work, of brilliance, of building something beautiful from nothing, about being invisible, about being erased, about being told she deserved what she'd earned, and then having everything stolen anyway. "Yes," Leora said, "I can do this." Alara's smile was sharp as a blade. "Then welcome to Thornhaven, Leora Vance. Let's go burn Cale Draven's empire to the ground." They walked back to the clearing together. Mira was still there, tense but unharmed, surrounded by soldiers who looked more curious than hostile. "Well?" Mira asked. "We're staying," Leora said. "For how long?" "Long enough to start a war." Mira's grin was fierce and reckless. "About damn time." That night, in a room in Thornhaven's main compound, small but clean, with actual walls and a door that locked, Leora spread her documents across a real desk for the first time in weeks. Outside, she could hear the sounds of the coalition preparing, weapons being sharpened, strategies being debated, an alliance that had spent years being shut out of power, finally seeing an opening, and at the center of it all, the invisible woman who'd built an empire, who was about to tear it down. Leora picked up her pen and began to write. Not treaties this time, not careful diplomatic language designed to make everyone happy. This time, she wrote the truth. Every manipulation, every stolen piece of work, every promise Kael had broken, every single thing she'd built that he'd claimed as his own. By dawn, she had 20 pages. By the end of the week, she'd have 100. And in 2 weeks, when she stood in front of the Conquered Council with every alpha in the Alliance watching, she'd make sure they couldn't look away. Kael had taught her to be invisible. Now she'd teach him the cost of underestimating a woman he'd tried to erase. The pen scratched across paper, steady and sure, as Leora Vance prepared to reclaim everything that had always been hers. The pen scratched across paper, steady and sure, as Leora Vance prepared to reclaim everything that had always been hers. Except the pen snapped. Leora stared at the broken pieces in her hand, cheap wood, cheaper ink bleeding across her palm. She'd been writing for 6 hours straight, barely stopping to breathe, and the damn thing had just given up. Kind of fitting, actually. She tossed the pieces aside and reached for another. The stack of completed pages sat beside her, edges already curling in Thornhaven's damp air. 23 pages of documented proof, names, dates, specific clauses and treaties that only she could have written, technical language that Kael wouldn't know if his life depended on it. Which, in about 2 weeks, it might. A knock at the door made her look up. Mira pushed inside without waiting for an answer, carrying 2 bowls of something that smelled better than anything Leora had eaten in days. "You're still writing," Mira said. "I'm still breathing too. Notice that?" "Funny." Mira set 1 bowl in front of her. "Eat. Alara says you look half dead and it's bad for morale." Leora picked up the spoon. Stew. Actual stew with meat and vegetables and everything. Her stomach cramped at the smell. "What morale? Half of Thornhaven thinks I'm a spy. The other half thinks you're a miracle." Mira sat across from her, digging into her own bowl. "Alara's been showing your documents to the senior commanders. They can't believe what Kael's been getting away with." "They can't believe I let him get away with it, you mean?" Mira's spoon paused halfway to her mouth. "That's not what I said." "It's what they're thinking." Leora ate mechanically, barely tasting it. "I was there. I watched him take credit for my work for 5 years. I could have stopped it. Should have stopped it." "And done what?" "Announced to 17 packs that their feared alpha was actually just a figurehead?" Mira shook her head. "They would have laughed you out of the territory. Or killed you. Probably both." "Maybe, but at least I would have tried." "You're trying now." Leora set down her spoon. "Now I'm desperate. There's a difference." The silence stretched between them. Outside, voices drifted through the compound, soldiers training, commanders planning, an alliance that was preparing for something it had wanted for years, a chance to break Kael's stranglehold on the south. And Leora was the weapon they planned to use. "Alara wants to see you," Mira said finally. Tomorrow morning. Something about the audit strategy. Did she say what specifically? Just that you need to be ready for questions. Hard ones. Mira's expression was troubled. Leora, some of the commanders are worried about what happens if Kael fights back during the council meeting, about whether you can actually prove what you're claiming. I can prove it. Can you prove it to people who don't want to believe you? Mira leaned forward. Because that's what you're facing. Alphas who've built their entire authority on the conquered structure. If you're right, if Kael really has been manipulating everything, then they've all been played. And powerful people don't like admitting they've been played. Leora knew that. Had been thinking about nothing else for days. The Conquered Council wasn't just Kael's allies. It was 17 alphas who'd staked their legitimacy on the treaties she'd written. Exposing Kael meant exposing how blind they'd all been, which meant they had every reason to destroy her credibility before she could destroy theirs. Then I'll make it undeniable, Leora said quietly. How? By showing them something even an alpha can't argue with. She pulled out the document she'd been working on before the pen broke, a side-by-side comparison of treaty language. On the left, the official version that had been presented to the council. On the right, the original draft in her handwriting, with annotations, corrections, and technical details that only the actual author would know. This is from the Grey March Border Agreement, Leora said. The official version has a clause about shared patrol rotations. Simple, straightforward, but look at the original. Mira leaned in. The original was covered in notes, calculations about patrol timing, observations about Grey March's defensive weaknesses, contingency language for 3 different scenarios depending on how the negotiation went. This is your handwriting, Mira said. Every page, every treaty, every clause. Leora spread out more documents. Kael can claim he dictated these to me, but he can't explain the technical knowledge, the political nuance, the fact that half these annotations reference conversations he wasn't even present for. Will that be enough? It has to be. But even as she said it, Leora felt the doubt creeping in. Because Mira was right. Proof wasn't the same as belief. And belief, in the world of pack politics, was everything. The next morning, Alara's office was crowded. Leora had expected a private meeting. Instead, she walked into a room full of Thornhaven's senior command, 8 people, all watching her with expressions that ranged from curious to openly hostile. Leora Vance, Alara gestured to an empty chair. Sit. We need to talk strategy. Leora sat. The chair was hard, positioned directly across from Alara's desk, with everyone else flanking the sides. Interrogation setup. Lovely. The Conquered Council meets in 12 days, Alara began. We've submitted the audit motion. Kael has 3 days to respond formally, but we've already heard through back channels that he's preparing to fight it. Of course he is, said a man to Leora's left. Commander Vasek, according to the insignia on his jacket. Gray-haired, weathered, with the kind of scars that came from decades of fighting. He's not going to let some runaway advisor dismantle his authority without a fight. I'm not a runaway advisor, Leora said evenly. I'm the person who built that authority. So you claim. So I can prove. Vasek's expression didn't change. Then prove it now. To us. Before we stake Thornhaven's reputation on your word. The room went quiet. Leora felt every eye on her, measuring, judging. This wasn't just about the audit anymore. This was about whether Thornhaven would actually back her when it mattered. What do you want to know? Leora asked. Everything. Alara's voice was calm but firm. Start with the Concord Treaty. How it was really negotiated. Who did what? Leave nothing out. So Leora told them. She started with the first meeting, 9 packs, all suspicious, all ready to walk away at the first sign of weakness. Kael had been there, yes, but he'd been a figurehead. The real negotiation had happened in smaller sessions, one-on-one conversations where Leora had identified each alpha's actual needs versus their stated demands. The Silverpine Pack claimed they wanted complete autonomy, Leora explained. But what they actually needed was guaranteed access to the eastern trade routes. So I gave them autonomy in name, but structured the trade agreement so they were dependent on Concord cooperation. They got what they needed. We got their compliance. And Kael knew about this manipulation? Vasek asked. Kael knew the outcome. He didn't know, didn't care how I got there. Leora pulled out one of her documents. This is the trade protocol I drafted. Notice the language here about voluntary participation and mutual benefit. It sounds collaborative, but the actual structure makes it nearly impossible for any single pack to operate independently without losing access to shared resources. One of the other commanders, a woman with sharp features and sharper eyes, leaned forward. You built a cage and made them think it was a sanctuary. I built a system that prevented constant warfare, Leora corrected. The borderlands were tearing themselves apart. Someone needed to create stability. And you decided you were that someone. I decided someone had to be. And Kael wasn't capable of it. The words hung in the air, dangerous words. The kind that could get you killed for speaking them about an alpha. Alara's expression was unreadable. Continue. Leora spent the next 2 hours walking them through the Concord's construction. Every treaty, every compromise, every piece of leverage she'd used to bring 17 different packs under one unified agreement. She showed them her notes, her calculations, her contingency plans. And slowly, the hostility in the room began to shift. Not to trust, not yet, but to something like grudging respect. This is impressive, Vasek admitted finally. If it's true, it's true. Then why did you stay invisible for so long? The sharp-eyed woman, Commander Saren, tilted her head. You had all this power, all this knowledge. Why let Kael take credit? It was the question Leora had been asking herself for weeks. The one that kept her awake at night, that made her stomach twist with shame and fury in equal measure. Because I was an idiot, she said flatly. I thought loyalty mattered. I thought if I made myself essential, if I built something incredible, Kael would eventually... She stopped. It doesn't matter what I thought. I was wrong. And now you want revenge. I want recognition. Leora met Saren's gaze. There's a difference. Revenge is about hurting Kael. Recognition is about making sure everyone knows who actually built what. If Kael gets hurt in the process? She shrugged. That's just a bonus. Saren smiled, cold and approving. I like her. The question, Alara said, is whether the council will like her, or more accurately, whether they'll believe her. She stood, moving to the window. Kael's already spreading word that you're unstable, that you stole confidential documents, that you're working with Thornhaven to undermine the Concord out of spite. All of which is technically true, Leora pointed out, which makes it effective. Alara turned back. You need something undeniable, something so clear, so obvious, that even Kael's allies can't dismiss it. I have the documents. Documents can be forged. Handwriting can be imitated. Alara's expression was grim. You need to prove you understand those systems better than Kael does, in real time, in front of everyone. Leora's mind raced. You want me to... What? Quiz him on his own treaties? I want you to expose the fact that he can't read them. Alara pulled out a map of the Concord territories. The audit will force Kael to present the original documents, the ones you encoded. When he can't explain them, when he can't answer basic questions about how his own systems work. She smiled. That's when they'll believe you. It was brilliant, terrifying, but brilliant. He'll prepare, Leora said. He's not stupid. He'll have people briefing him, coaching him. On what? Alara gestured at the documents Leora had brought. You're the only person who understands the full scope of those systems. Anyone else he brings in will only have partial knowledge. And partial knowledge won't save him when you start asking questions that only the actual architect could answer. Leora felt something cold and sharp settle in her chest. This wasn't just about proving Kael was a fraud. This was about humiliating him, publicly, in front of every alpha who'd spent years treating him like a legend. He'll never forgive this, she said quietly. Good, Vasek said. Men like Kael don't deserve forgiveness. The meeting broke up an hour later. As Leora was leaving, Alara caught her arm. There's something else, Alara said, voice low. Something you need to know before the council meeting. What? Kael's hired more hunters, professional ones this time. They're asking questions in every town between here and Ironhold. Alara's grip tightened. He's not just trying to discredit you, Leora. He's trying to kill you before you can testify. Leora had expected that, but hearing it confirmed still made her stomach drop. How long do we have? Maybe a week before they narrow down your location. Maybe less. Alara released her. We can protect you here. But the moment you leave for the council meeting, you're exposed. Then we don't give them time to find me. Leora's mind was already working. We leave early, travel fast. Get to the council grounds before Kael knows we've moved. That's a 5-day ride minimum, through territory where half the packs are loyal to Kael. Then we take the mountain route. Elara stared at her. The widow's spine? That's a death trap even in good weather, and it's almost winter. It's also the one route Kael won't expect. Leora felt that familiar rush, the same feeling she got when solving an impossible negotiation problem. He'll have people watching the main roads. But the spine? No one is stupid enough to try that this time of year. Because it's suicide. It's survival. Leora held Elara's gaze. I didn't come this far to get killed by some hired thug 3 days before I can expose Kael. If the spine is the only way to reach the council alive, then that's the way we go. Elara was quiet for a long moment. Then she nodded slowly. I'll arrange an escort, small group, experienced climbers. But Leora, if the weather turns, if there's a storm, she didn't finish. I know the risks. Do you? Because this isn't a negotiation you can talk your way out of. This is nature. And nature doesn't care how smart you are. Leora smiled, thin and bitter. Then it'll be a nice change from dealing with alphas. They left 3 days later, 6 people total. Leora, Mira, Elara, and 3 Thornhaven soldiers who'd grown up in the mountains and knew the spine's moods. They traveled light, carrying only essentials and the documents Leora would need for the audit. The first 2 days were brutal but manageable. The widow's spine was a narrow ridge that cut through the northern mountains, rising 3,000 feet above the valleys on either side. One wrong step meant a fall that would last long enough to regret every decision you'd ever made. But the path was clear, the weather held, and they made good time. On the 3rd day, everything went wrong. The storm hit at dawn, not rain, but snow. Heavy, wet snow that turned the path into a slick nightmare. Visibility dropped to 20 feet. The temperature plummeted. We need to stop, Mira shouted over the wind. Find shelter. There is no shelter. One of the soldiers, Karn, a massive man with a beard full of ice, pointed ahead. Nearest cave is 2 miles. We push through or we freeze. They pushed through. Leora had never been so cold in her life. Her hands were numb. Her face felt like someone was pressing knives into her cheeks. Every step was a gamble, solid rock or hidden ice, safe path or 1,000-foot drop. She focused on Elara's back, following exactly where she stepped, and tried not to think about dying. They were halfway to the cave when Leora heard the crack. Not thunder, not wind, ice. Down! Karn's voice cut through the storm. Get down now! Leora dropped, slamming into the rock face as something massive roared overhead. An avalanche. Not huge, but big enough. Ice and snow and loose rock cascading down the slope above them, missing them by 20 feet, but close enough that Leora felt the wind of it. The rumble faded. Leora pushed herself up, shaking, and looked back. The path behind them was gone. Just gone. Buried under tons of debris that had obliterated the narrow trail they'd been walking minutes before. Everyone okay? Elara's voice was steady, professional. Affirmatives came back. Shaken, but okay. We can't go back, Mira said, staring at the destruction. We can't stay here either. Karn wiped snow from his face. Another slide could come any time. We move. Now. They moved. The cave, when they finally reached it, was barely big enough for all of them. But it was dry, and it was shelter. Karn got a fire started while the others collapsed against the walls, breathing hard. Leora's pack had gotten soaked during the scramble. She opened it carefully, heart sinking as water dripped out. Most of the documents were destroyed. Ink bleeding, paper disintegrating, 5 days of careful preparation, ruined. No, she whispered. Mira looked over. How bad? Bad. Leora sorted through the mess, salvaging what she could. Maybe a third of the documents were still readable. The side-by-side comparisons. Some of the annotated drafts. But the detailed breakdowns, the technical analysis, the carefully compiled evidence, gone. I can still testify, Leora said, more to herself than anyone else. I still know what I know. I can still prove... Prove what? Elara crouched beside her. Without documentation, you're just one woman claiming she built an empire. Kael will tear you apart. Then I'll rebuild the documents. In 2 days? Before the council meeting? Alara shook her head. Leora, even you can't work that fast. Leora stared at the ruined papers in her hands. Alara was right. She couldn't recreate 5 years of work in 48 hours. Couldn't reproduce the detailed analysis that would make her testimony undeniable, which meant she was walking into the council meeting with partial evidence and a whole lot of fury, against an alpha who wanted her dead and had the resources to make it happen. We could delay, Mira said quietly. Ask for more time. Kael's hunters are already looking for us. Leora let the ruined documents fall. We delay, they find us. And then there's no council meeting, no testimony, no justice. Then what do we do? Leora looked at the fire, watching flames consume the wood Karn had gathered, burning everything down to ash and heat and light. An idea began to form. Dangerous. Maybe stupid, but possible. We give them something they can't ignore, she said slowly. Not documents. Not evidence they can dismiss or claim is forged. Then what? Alara asked. A demonstration. Leora looked up, meeting her eyes. The Concord's entire communication system, the one that coordinates all 17 packs, that handles everything from trade disputes to military deployment. It's based on a protocol I designed. Encrypted, secure, impossible to break without the key. And I have the key. In my head. Leora's smile was sharp. At the council meeting, I'll prove I built that system by shutting it down. Completely. In front of everyone. Then I'll offer to turn it back on, once they acknowledge who actually created it. The cave went very quiet. That's insane, Mira said. That's leverage, Alara corrected. Her expression was thoughtful. You disable the communication system, you disable Kael's ability to maintain control. Every alpha will feel it immediately. They'll have no choice but to listen. They'll also have every reason to kill you, Vasek pointed out. 17 angry alphas who just lost their ability to coordinate? You'll be lucky if Kael gets to you first. Then I'd better be convincing. Leora felt that old familiar rush, the feeling of impossible odds and one chance to get it right. I don't need them to like me. I just need them to know that without me, their entire alliance collapses. And if they decide you're too dangerous to let live, then I die knowing I burned Kael's legacy to the ground on my way out. Alara studied her for a long moment. Then she laughed, sharp and genuine. You really are something, Leora Vance. All right, we do this your way, but I want backup plans. Multiple ones. Already working on it. They spent the rest of the night in the cave, planning. By the time dawn broke, they had 3 different strategies depending on how the council reacted. None of them were safe. All of them required Leora to stand in front of the most powerful people in the borderlands and essentially threaten them into listening. As suicidal plans went, it was pretty spectacular. The storm cleared by mid-morning. They left the cave and continued along the spine, moving faster now. The avalanche had changed something, fear maybe, or desperation, but they covered twice the ground they had the previous day. On the evening of the 5th day, they reached the valley where the council grounds waited. Leora stood at the ridge, looking down at the massive stone complex below. Flags from 17 different packs flew above the main hall. Already, she could see delegations arriving, guards, advisors, alphas themselves. And somewhere down there, Kael Draven was preparing to destroy her. Last chance to back out, Alara said quietly. I'm not backing out. Didn't think so, Alara signaled the others. We'll enter at dawn. Give you time to rest, get cleaned up. You need to look like someone worth listening to. I need to look like someone they can't afford to ignore. That too. They made camp in the tree line, far enough from the grounds that they wouldn't be spotted but close enough to move fast when needed. Leora tried to sleep and failed. Her mind kept racing, running through every possible scenario, every argument Kael might make, every way this could go wrong. Around midnight, Mira found her sitting outside the tent, staring at the stars. Can't sleep either? Mira sat beside her. Too much to think about. Want to talk about it? Not really. Leora was quiet for a moment. You should go back, tomorrow, before the council meeting. This is going to get messy, and you don't need to be caught in it. After everything we've been through to get here, you think I'm walking away now? Mira's voice was fierce. I'm seeing this through, Leora, all the way. Even if it means dying? Even if it means that? Mira bumped her shoulder. Besides, someone needs to watch your back. You're too busy plotting revenge to notice assassins. Leora managed a weak smile. It's not revenge. Keep telling yourself that. They sat in silence, watching the stars wheel overhead. Tomorrow, everything would change. Either Leora would prove herself and reclaim what she'd built, or she'd die trying. Honestly, at this point, she wasn't sure which outcome scared her more. Dawn came too fast. They entered the council grounds with the early delegations blending in with the crowd. No one looked twice at Leora, just another advisor, another face in the mass of people attending the most significant council meeting in years. Kyle's audit motion had shaken the entire Concord. Every pack wanted to know if their feared leader was really manipulating them, and every alpha was preparing to defend their own authority if the answer turned out to be yes. The main hall was enormous, circular, with 17 seats arranged in a ring, one for each alpha. Behind them, space for advisors and witnesses. Above, galleries where pack members could observe. Leora found a seat in the upper gallery, tucked between Mira and one of the Thornhaven soldiers. From here, she had a clear view of the entire hall, and there, in the largest of the alpha seats, sat Kyle Draven. He looked exactly the same, tall, commanding, confident in a way that made people gravitate toward him. Seraphine sat at his right hand, beautiful and composed. Leora's hands curled into fists. Alara was on the council floor, representing Thornhaven. When the session started, she'd call for the audit, force Kyle to present his documents, and then Leora would have her chance. The hall quieted as the eldest alpha, Marcus Greymarch, ancient and weathered, rose to speak. We are gathered to address a serious motion, he began, his voice carrying easily. Thornhaven Coalition has called for a full audit of the Concord treaties. They claim irregularities, manipulation. They claim, he paused, that Alpha Draven has been operating outside the agreed terms. Murmurs rippled through the hall. Kale's expression didn't change. These are serious accusations, Marcus continued. Before we proceed, does Thornhaven wish to present evidence? Alara stood. We do. But first, we call upon Alpha Draven to present the original treaty documents. Let the council see for themselves what language was agreed upon. Kale rose smoothly. Of course, the documents are prepared. However, his eyes swept the hall. Before we waste the council's time on baseless accusations, I want to address the source of these claims. Leora's stomach dropped. The motion comes from Thornhaven, Kale continued, but the information comes from a traitor. Leora Vance, my former advisor, stole confidential documents when she fled Ironhold. She's now working with our enemies to undermine the Concord out of personal spite. That's a lie, Alara said flatly. Is it? Then where is she? Why isn't she here to make these accusations herself? Kale's smile was cold. Because she knows they're false. Because she's hiding like the coward she is. The words hit like physical blows. Leora felt every eye in the hall searching, wondering. Mira grabbed her arm. Don't, not yet. Wait for... I'm not hiding. Leora's voice cut through the murmurs. Heads turned. She stood slowly, stepping forward to the gallery rail where everyone could see her. I'm right here, Kyle. The hall exploded into chaos. Kale's face went white, then red, then settled into an expression of such fury that Leora actually felt afraid. But she didn't sit down. Leora Vance, Marcus's voice boomed. You are not recognized. Sit down. I'm the one who wrote those treaties you're about to audit, Leora called out. Every word, every clause, and I can prove it. You can prove nothing. Kale's composure cracked. Guards, remove her. On what authority? Alara stood. She's making claims relevant to the audit. Let her speak. She's a criminal, a thief. Then let her speak and prove herself wrong. Alara's voice was steel. Unless you're afraid of what she'll say. The silence that followed was absolute. Marcus looked between them. Then slowly, he nodded. Leora Vance, come forward. You will have your chance to speak. Leora descended the stairs on legs that shook. Every step brought her closer to the council floor. Closer to Kael. Closer to the moment that would either vindicate 5 years of work or end with her death. She reached the floor, stood in the center of the ring, 17 alphas staring at her, and Kael, across the circle, eyes promising murder. "Well?" Marcus said. "Speak." Leora took a breath. This was it. The moment everything changed. 5 years ago, she began, Kael Draven hired me to handle clerical work. What he got was someone who could think, who could build, who could turn 17 warring packs into a unified alliance. Lies, Kael said. Then explain the communication protocols. Leora pulled a small device from her pocket, a cipher key she'd built weeks ago, just in case. Every pack in this council uses an encrypted system to coordinate. Messages, trade reports, military deployment. That system has a master control, and I'm the only person who knows how to access it. She held up the key. This proves I built that system, and unless someone wants to call me a liar, I'm about to shut the entire network down. Oh, you wouldn't dare! Leora activated the key. Across the hall, communication devices went dark. Every single one. The sudden silence was deafening. What have you done? An alpha jumped to his feet. Others followed, panicked, furious. I've proven my point. Leora's voice was calm. The system you all rely on? I built it. The treaties that keep you from killing each other? I wrote them. The alliance you think Kael created? She looked directly at him. That was me, all of it. And if you don't believe me, try running your precious Concord without the systems I designed. Kael's hand went to his weapon. I'll kill you myself. Try it. Alara moved to stand beside Leora, weapon drawn, in front of the entire council. Let's see how that plays. The hall was chaos now. Alphas shouting, guards moving, the entire foundation of the Concord cracking in real time. And Leora, standing in the center of it all, finally visible, finally undeniable. Marcus slammed his staff against the floor. Silence! It took 3 tries, but eventually the hall quieted. This is unprecedented, Marcus said slowly. He looked at Kael. Alpha Draven, can you restore the communication system? Kael's jaw worked. It's a temporary disruption. My people will... Can you restore it? Marcus repeated. No. The admission fell like a stone. Then perhaps, Marcus said quietly, we should hear what Leora Vance has to say. Kael's hand tightened on his weapon, and Leora realized with crystal clarity that he was going to try to kill her, right here, right now. Consequences be damned. She met his eyes across the circle and smiled. Let's talk about who really built your empire, Kael. Every single piece. Let's talk about who really built your empire, Kael. Every single piece. The silence in the hall was absolute. 17 alphas, hundreds of witnesses, all frozen in the moment between one world and the next. Kael's hand was still on his weapon. Leora could see the calculation in his eyes, wondering if he could reach her before Alara's blade found his throat, wondering if killing her in front of the entire council would be worth it. Touch that sword, and you're dead, Alara said quietly. Not a threat. A promise. Marcus Greymarch slammed his staff again. No one draws steel in this hall. Is that understood? His eyes swept the circle, landing on Kael. Alpha Draven, stand down. For a moment, Leora thought Kael might actually do it. Might actually try to kill her and damn the consequences. His jaw was tight enough to crack teeth, his breathing controlled but furious. Then Seraphine's hand touched his arm, gentle, restraining, and Kael's hand fell away from the weapon. Thank you. Marcus turned to Leora. You've made a significant claim. You've also disrupted the Concord's operations, so speak quickly and speak clearly, because my patience is limited. Leora stepped forward. Her hands had stopped shaking. The fear that had been eating at her for days was gone, burned away by pure, crystalline focus. The Concord of 17, she began, was signed 3 years ago. Every alpha in this room remembers that day. Remembers Kael Draven standing at the center of this hall, accepting your acknowledgement as the architect of peace. She paused. I was there too. In the back. where no one was looking. Ancient history, Kael said. What's your point? My point is that every word of that treaty came from me, not you. Leora pulled out one of the salvaged documents, water-stained but still legible. This is the original draft of the Silver Pine Trade Agreement, Section 7, Clause C, regarding resource allocation during territorial disputes. She held it up so the alphas could see the cramped handwriting, the margin notes, the corrections layered on corrections. The official version reads, "In cases of conflicting territorial claims, trade routes shall remain neutral and accessible to all parties pending resolution." Leora looked at Kael. Simple language, diplomatic, Kael's style, right? Kael said nothing. Except the original says something else. Leora read from the document. Trade routes in disputed territories will default to pre-conflict access patterns, weighted by historical usage data from the preceding 10-year period, with enforcement tied to majority council approval rather than bilateral agreement. A few alphas leaned forward, interested now. That's not diplomatic language, Leora continued. That's technical. That's someone who understands that neutral access means nothing without defined metrics and enforcement mechanisms. That's someone who spent 6 months analyzing historical trade data to find a solution that wouldn't favor any single pack. She looked at Kael again. That's someone who actually understands how systems work. I had advisors. You had me. Leora's voice cut across his. And I can prove it, not with documents you can claim are forged, with knowledge. She turned to the assembled alphas. Ask me anything. Any clause in any treaty. Any provision in the enforcement protocols. Any detail about how the Concord actually functions. I'll answer. Then ask Kael the same questions. The murmurs started immediately. Alphas conferring with their advisors, trying to decide if this was worth pursuing. Finally, an alpha Leora recognized, Sarah Silverpine, sharp-eyed and sharper-minded, stood. Very well, I'll ask. She pulled out a copy of the Concord Treaty. Section 12, Dispute Resolution Framework. Explain the escalation protocol. Leora didn't hesitate. 4-tier system. Tier 1. Direct negotiation between affected parties. Maximum duration 14 days. Tier 2. Mediated negotiation with neutral third party from the Council. Maximum duration 30 days. Tier 3. Binding arbitration by a panel of 3 alphas selected by lottery from non-involved packs. Tier 4. Full council vote with 2/3 majority required for enforcement. Correct. Sarah's expression was unreadable. Now explain why we use lottery selection for the arbitration panel instead of seniority or volunteer basis. Because volunteer basis creates conflicts of interest. Packs with existing grudges or alliances would volunteer strategically, and seniority would give permanent power to the oldest alphas regardless of their actual understanding of the specific dispute. Leora met her eyes. Lottery selection ensures randomness, which approximates fairness in a system where true neutrality is impossible. Sarah sat down slowly. That's detailed. That's correct, Leora said, because I'm the one who designed it. I spent 3 months analyzing previous dispute resolution attempts across the borderlands. I documented 47 cases, identified the failure patterns, and built a system specifically to avoid those pitfalls. She turned back to Kael. Your turn. Tell them why we use lottery selection. Kael's expression was stone. Because it's fair. That's not an explanation. That's a platitude. Leora's voice was relentless. Why is it fair? What alternatives did you consider? What data informed your decision? I don't need to justify my reasoning to... You do if you want them to believe you created this system. Leora looked at the council. He can't answer, not specifically, not with the kind of technical detail that only comes from actually building something. He can give you broad concepts, diplomatic language, the kind of thing that sounds good in speeches, but ask him how it actually works. She shook her head. He has no idea. This is absurd, Seraphine stood. Leora Vance is trying to claim credit for work that dozens of people contributed to. Kael had an entire team of advisors. Name them. Leora's voice was sharp. Name one other person who worked on the Concord treaties. Seraphine hesitated. There were multiple contributors. Name one. The silence stretched. You can't, Leora said quietly, Because there was only ever one person doing that work. Me. Everyone else, Kyle's team, they handled logistics, scheduling, communication. But the actual treaties, the actual system design, she tapped the document in her hand. That was always just me. Another alpha stood, Vasek Razorfin, old and brutal and not someone who suffered fools. Let's say you're telling the truth. Let's say you did write these treaties. Why should we care? His voice was harsh. Kael's the alpha. You were his advisor. Your job was to advise. His job was to lead. Seems like everyone was doing exactly what they were supposed to. Is that what you think leadership is? Lior turned to face him. Taking credit for other people's work? Never understanding the systems you rely on? Because if that's leadership, then maybe the Concord deserves to collapse. Gasps rippled through the hall. You didn't question the concept of alpha authority. Not openly. Not like this. But Leora was past caring about protocol. I'm not trying to undermine your authority, she continued. I'm trying to make you understand that the system you trust, the alliance you rely on, is built on one person's knowledge. Mine. And Kael just tried to erase me, permanently. She looked at Kael. Tell them about the doctrine of severance. Tell them what you plan to do to me. Kael's expression went very carefully neutral. I don't know what You invoked it. Mira's voice rang out from the gallery. 3 days before Leora disappeared, I heard you discussing it with your second. You were going to use an ancient law to erase her from pack records entirely. Who is that? Marcus demanded. Mira Castellan, Ironhold Guard. Former Ironhold Guard. Mira stood. I was there. I heard the conversation. Kael wanted Leora gone. Not just exiled, erased. Every contribution struck from the record. Her name forbidden. Because she was a security risk, Kael's composure finally cracked. She had access to confidential information. Information I generated, Leora cut in. You're right that I had access to everything, because I created everything. And that scared you, because you knew, you've always known, that without me, you can't maintain what I built. That's not... Prove me wrong. Leora's voice was steel. Right now, in front of everyone, explain to this council how the communication encryption works. The actual technical protocol. Not just that it's secure. Tell them the key generation algorithm, the handshake sequence, the redundancy failsafes. Kael stared at her, said nothing. You can't, Leora said, because you never bothered to learn. You just took my work, put your name on it, and called it leadership. I united 17 packs, Kael's voice rose. I ended decades of warfare. I created peace where there was only blood. No. Leora's voice was quiet now, but it carried. I did that. You just stood in front and looked powerful while I did the actual work. The hall erupted. Alphas shouting, advisors arguing, the entire foundation of the Concord's authority shaking in real time. Marcus slammed his staff repeatedly. Silence! Silence or I clear this hall! It took minutes, but eventually order returned. Marcus looked old suddenly, tired. This is beyond what I'm equipped to judge. If what you say is true, Leora Vance, then the Concord's entire structure is built on false pretenses. And if you're lying, he shook his head, then you've committed treason against every pack in this alliance. I'm not lying. Leora pulled out the cipher key again. And I can prove it. The communication system I just shut down, I'll restore it, right now, in front of everyone. Then you'll know for certain that I built it. She activated the key. A different sequence this time, carefully entered. Across the hall, communication devices flickered back to life. Message queues flooded. Alerts chimed. The system was back. Sarah Silverpine stood slowly. That shouldn't be possible. Those systems have multiple redundancies, distributed control. No single person should be able to disable or restore the entire network. No single person except the one who designed it, Leora said. I built in a master override, Matki, hidden in the core protocol, because I knew that someday I might need to prove exactly what I'm proving right now. She looked around the circle. I'm not asking you to punish Kael. I'm not asking for revenge. I'm asking for acknowledgement, for recognition that I built what you've been relying on. And for the understanding that if you want it to keep working, you need to stop pretending I don't exist. Alara stepped forward. Thornhaven formally requests that Lyora Vance be granted recognition as the chief architect of the Concord Treaty System, and that she be given official authority over its maintenance and development going forward. That's insane, Kyle said. You can't just... Why not? Vasek Razorfin's voice cut across him. The old Alpha was studying Lyora with new eyes. If she built it, she should maintain it. Makes sense to me. She's not even Pack, another Alpha objected. She has no bloodline, no formal standing. She has knowledge, Sarah Silverpine stood again, which is apparently more than our great unifier has. Her tone was dry, cutting. I vote we grant Thornhaven's request. At minimum, we need Lyora Vance's expertise to ensure system stability. And at maximum, Marcus asked. At maximum, we acknowledge that we've all been played by a very good liar. Sarah looked at Kyle. I want the audit. Full transparency. Every treaty document presented and examined. If Lyora's telling the truth, it'll be obvious. If she's lying, Sarah's smile was cold. Then we can discuss appropriate punishment. The vote was swift. 13 alphas in favor of the audit, 2 against, 2 abstaining. Kale's face was white. The audit is approved, Marcus said heavily. Alpha Draven, you will present the original treaty documents for examination. We reconvene in 2 hours. The hall began to empty. Alphas conferring with advisors, guards moving to secure the building, the machinery of pack politics grinding into motion. Lyora stayed in the center of the circle, suddenly exhausted. She'd done it, forced the audit, proven her technical knowledge, taken the first step toward acknowledgement. But the look on Kyle's face as he left the hall told her this was far from over. Alara appeared at her side. Well, that was dramatic. That was terrifying. Lyora's hands were shaking again now that the adrenaline was fading. Did I really just threaten the entire Concord in front of the council? You really did. Alara's grin was fierce. It was beautiful. Insane, but beautiful. Mira pushed through the crowd, wrapped Lyora in a quick, hard hug. You were amazing. Also possibly suicidal. But amazing. Kale's gonna kill me, Lyora pulled back. Not metaphorically. Actually kill me. You saw his face. He'll have to go through me first. Alara's expression turned serious. And about 50 Thornhaven soldiers I've positioned around this building. You're under coalition protection now, officially. That won't stop him. No, but it'll make him think twice about trying anything public. Alara glanced toward the doors where Kyle had disappeared. The next 2 hours are critical. He'll be scrambling to prepare the documents, trying to figure out if his forgeries will hold up under examination. They won't. Lyora felt that familiar analytical clarity settling back in. The cipher I used isn't complex, but it's embedded throughout the technical language. Anyone who actually reads the documents closely will see the inconsistencies. And if Kale tries to present fakes, then I point out the specific passages that are encoded. Ask him to explain them. Watch him fail. Lyora's smile was thin. He's trapped. If he presents the real documents, they're unreadable. If he presents fakes, I can prove they're fraudulent. Either way, he loses. Unless he doesn't show up. Mira's voice was quiet. Unless he runs. The three of them looked at each other. It was a real possibility. Kyle could claim illness, emergency, anything to buy time. Could even try to dissolve the council meeting entirely, scatter the alphas before the audit could proceed. He won't run, Lyora said finally. Running means admitting defeat, and Kyle's ego won't allow that. He'll show up, he'll present something, and then we prove he's a fraud. Alara gripped Lyora's shoulder. Get some food. Rest if you can. 2 hours, and we finish this. The 2 hours felt like 2 minutes and 2 years all at once. Lyora tried to eat and couldn't. Tried to rest and spent the whole time replaying every possible scenario. Tried to review her remaining documents and found herself just staring at them, mind too full to focus. Finally, Mira physically dragged her away from the desk they'd been given in a side chamber. Stop. Mira's voice was firm. You're prepared. You've been prepared for this moment for 5 years, even if you didn't know it. So stop second-guessing yourself and trust what you know. What if I'm wrong? The words came out small. What if I've been delusional this whole time? What if Kael really did contribute more than I remember, and I'm just... You're not wrong. Mira's hands gripped her arms. I watched you work, Leora. I saw you spend entire nights fixing problems Kael created in 5-minute conversations. I saw you rebuild agreements he nearly destroyed with his ego. You built that empire, every piece of it, and it's time everyone else saw it too. A bell rang, the 2-hour mark. Leora stood, straightened her clothes, tried to look like someone worth listening to instead of a woman who'd walked 300 miles through hostile territory and nearly died in an avalanche. Ready? Elara appeared in the doorway. No. Leora managed a shaky smile. Let's go anyway. The council hall was packed, every seat filled, the galleries overflowing. Word had spread. This wasn't just an audit anymore. This was a reckoning. Leora took her place in the circle. Across from her, Kael stood with Seraphine and 3 advisors she didn't recognize. He looked composed, confident, like a man who'd found his footing. That worried her. Marcus called the session to order. We are here to examine the original Concord Treaty documents. Alpha Draven, you've had time to prepare. Present the documents for review. Kael gestured. One of his advisors came forward carrying a leather case. Expensive, ornate, exactly the kind of thing Kael would use to make documents look important. The advisor opened the case, removed a stack of papers, and Leora's stomach dropped. They weren't the originals, weren't the encoded version she'd left behind. These were completely new documents, fresh paper, clean ink, perfect copies that looked official but were absolutely undeniably fake. Kael had forged everything. These are the original treaty drafts, Kael said smoothly. As you can see, they're annotated in my hand with notes from various discussions held during the negotiation process. He was gambling, betting that no one would examine them closely enough to spot the forgery, betting that his word as an alpha would outweigh Leora's accusations. Sarah Silverpine took the documents, scanned them. Her expression was unreadable. These are quite detailed, she said slowly. I take my responsibilities seriously. Kael's voice was steady. The Concord represents years of careful work. Of course, I documented everything thoroughly. Of course. Sarah looked at Leora. Do you dispute these documents? Absolutely. Leora stepped forward. Those are forgeries, recent ones. Look at the paper, it's fresh. Look at the ink, it hasn't aged. And look at the content. She pointed to a specific passage. That section references the amended border protocols established in Year 3 of the Concord. But we're currently in Year 3. Those amendments haven't been established yet. Silence. Kael's jaw tightened. That's a projection. A note about future planning. In a document you claim is the original draft from 3 years ago? Leora's voice was sharp. You're referencing events that haven't happened yet in a document that predates them by 3 years? Murmurs rippled through the hall, alphas leaning forward, examining the papers more closely. That could be an error, Seraphine said quickly. A misfiled note. Then explain this. Leora pulled out one of her water-damaged documents. This is an actual page from the original drafts. Water-damaged, yes. But look at the paper. The aging. The way the ink has settled into the fibers over years. She held it up beside Kael's forgeries. Compare that to your originals. Fresh paper, modern ink. These documents are weeks old at most. Vasek Razorfen stood, took both sets of documents, examined them in the light. His expression darkened. She's right. His voice cut through the murmurs. These aren't old documents. These are recent forgeries. That's ridiculous, Kael started. Don't. Vasek's tone was dangerous. I've been reading documents for 60 years, Draven. I know what aged paper looks like. And this? He held up Kael's forgeries. This is fresh. This is fraudulent. The hall exploded. Alphas shouting. Some at Kael. Some at Leora. The entire Concord fracturing in real time. Marcus slammed his staff. Kael Draven, explain yourself! Kael stood frozen, trapped. Finally, his composure shattered. The originals were compromised. His voice rose over the chaos. Leora encoded them when she fled, made them unreadable. I had to reconstruct them from memory. From whose memory? Leora's voice cut across his. Mine? Because you certainly didn't remember the details. Those forgeries are full of errors, technical mistakes that someone who actually negotiated these treaties would never make. She turned to the council. He can't even fake it convincingly. That's how little he understood what I built. I understood everything. Kale's control was gone now, pure fury breaking through. I gave you the authority. I provided the platform. Without me, you would have been nothing. Without you, I would have been visible. Leora's voice shook. I spent 5 years building an empire while you took every ounce of credit. I made you powerful. I made you respected. And the moment I wasn't useful anymore, you tried to erase me. Because you were weak. Kale's face was twisted with rage. You wanted recognition? You wanted to stand beside me as an equal? You were never equal, Leora. You were a tool. A useful tool, yes. But still just a tool. The words hung in the air. Every alpha in the hall heard them. Every witness. Every guard. Kale had just confirmed everything Leora had accused him of. Sarah Silverpine stood slowly. Well, I think we have our answer. This is... Seraphine tried to interrupt, but Sarah's raised hand stopped her. Alpha Draven just admitted that Leora Vance built the systems we rely on. He admitted that he used her work and took credit for it, and he admitted publicly that he valued her only as a tool. Sarah's voice was cold. I don't need to see any more documents. I've heard enough. Other alphas were standing now, some angry, some disgusted, all recognizing that something fundamental had just broken. Marcus looked at Kyle. Do you have anything to say? Any defense? Kale's breathing was harsh. He looked around the circle, seeing the judgment in every face. Then his eyes landed on Leora, and the hatred there was pure and absolute. I made a mistake, he said quietly. I should have erased you when I had the chance. Then you would have lost everything even faster. Leora's voice was steady now. Because without me, your entire empire collapses. You know it. I know it. And now everyone else knows it too. Marcus closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them, his expression was grim. Kale Draven, the council has heard your admission, has seen the evidence of forgery, has witnessed your treatment of the person who built the systems we rely on. He paused. You are hereby stripped of your authority over Concord operations. Pending further investigation, your role in the Alliance is suspended. The words fell like a hammer. Kyle's face went white. You can't. We can. We just did. Vasek's voice was hard. You lied to us. All of us. Made us think you were something you're not. That's not leadership. That's fraud. And Leora Vance, Marcus continued, is hereby granted full authority over the Concord's technical and administrative systems. As the actual architect of the Alliance, she will work with the Council to ensure stability and continued function. Leora's knees nearly gave out. She'd won. Actually won. But the look on Kyle's face said this wasn't over. The session dissolved into chaos. Alphas conferring, advisors scrambling, the entire political landscape shifting in real time. Alara appeared at Leora's side, guiding her toward an exit. We need to move, Alara said quietly. Now, before Kyle does something stupid. Too late. Mira's voice was sharp. She pointed. Kale was walking toward them, not fast, not aggressive, just walking, like a man who'd made a decision. Guards moved to intercept, but Kyle held up his hand. I just want to talk, that's all. Talk from over there, Alara said, blade half drawn. Leora. Kale's voice was steady. You won. Congratulations. You got what you wanted. What I wanted was recognition, not this. Leora gestured at the chaos around them. I just wanted you to acknowledge what I built. And now everyone acknowledges it. Kyle stopped a few feet away. So what happens next? You take control? Remake the Concord in your image? I maintain what I built. Nothing more. Nothing more? Kale's laugh was bitter. You humiliated me in front of the entire Alliance. You destroyed my authority, my reputation, everything I've spent years building. Everything I spent years building, Leora corrected quietly. You just wore it like a crown. Kale stared at her, and for just a moment she saw something that might have been pain beneath the fury. I did value you, he said. Maybe not the way you wanted, but I valued what you could do. That's not the same thing as valuing who I am. I know.
Kale's voice was soft. I know that now. Too late, but I know it. He turned and walked away.
Seraphine appeared at his side, and together they left the hall. Leora watched them go, feeling something complicated and painful twist in her chest.
Are you okay? Mira asked. I don't know. Leora looked at her friend. I won. I proved everything. Got the recognition I wanted. So why doesn't it feel better? Because winning isn't the same as healing. Alar's voice was gentle, but it's a start. The council session officially ended an hour later. Leora spent that hour being congratulated, questioned, and examined by alphas who suddenly saw her as valuable instead of invisible. It was exhausting and strange, and nothing like she'd imagined. But as she stood in the empty hall afterward, looking at the 17 seats arranged in their circle, she felt something settle in her chest. She'd done it, reclaimed her work, proven her worth, made them all see what Kael had tried so hard to hide. The invisible architect was invisible no more, and tomorrow she'd start building something new, something that was hers, something that no one could ever take away. And tomorrow she'd start building something new, something that was hers, something that no one could ever take away. Except tomorrow came with complications she hadn't anticipated. Leora woke in the guest quarters Thornhaven had provided. Actual quarters this time, not a tent or a cave or a hunter's cabin, to someone pounding on her door hard enough to shake the frame. "I'm coming," she called, fumbling for clothes that weren't still damp from mountain travel. The door opened before she reached it. Alara stood there, fully armed, expression grim. "We have a problem." "Good morning to you too." "Kael's missing." Alara stepped inside, closed the door. He and Seraphine left the council grounds last night. No one's seen them since. Leora's stomach dropped. "Missing how? Like fled the territory missing, or like no one knows missing?" He dismissed his guards, told them he needed time to think. That was 8 hours ago. Alara's jaw was tight. "Marcus is calling an emergency session. Half the alphas think he ran. The other half think he's planning something." "What do you think?" "I think a man who just lost everything in front of the entire Concord isn't going to go quietly." Alara moved to the window, scanning the grounds below. "And I think you need to be very careful until we find him." Leora finished dressing quickly. Her mind was already racing through possibilities. Kael running made sense. His authority was destroyed, his reputation in ruins. What did he have left to stay for? But Kael's ego had never let him walk away from a fight before. Why start now? The emergency council session was tense and chaotic. 17 alphas trying to figure out how to handle the sudden disappearance of the man who'd supposedly held their alliance together for years. "We need to consider the possibility that he's organizing resistance," Sarah Silverpine said. "Kael still has loyalists, packs who've benefited from his leadership, who won't accept his removal easily." "He has no leadership to remove," Vasek countered. "We stripped his authority yesterday. He's just another alpha now. Less than that, actually. He's a proven liar and forger." "Which makes him desperate," Sarah's voice was sharp. "Desperate men do dangerous things." Marcus raised his hand for silence. "We've sent trackers. If Kael's still in the region, we'll find him. Until then, we proceed with stabilizing the Concord." He looked at Leora. "Which means you need to get the administrative systems fully operational immediately." Leora stood. "The communication network is already restored, but the full administrative transition will take weeks, maybe months. Kael's people are still embedded throughout the bureaucracy, and they're not going to cooperate willingly." "Then replace them." "With who? I can't run 17 packs worth of administrative operations alone." Leora pulled out a list she'd started compiling the night before. "I need staff, trained people who understand the systems, and I need the council's backing to make personnel changes, because the second I start replacing Kael's loyalists, they're going to push back hard." "You have our backing," Marcus said. "Do what needs to be done." It sounded simple. It wasn't. Leora spent the next 3 days drowning in the reality of what she'd won. The Concord wasn't just treaties and protocols. It was hundreds of people, all doing jobs Kael had assigned them, all loyal to the structure he'd built around himself. And now Leora had to dismantle that structure while keeping everything running. She started with the communication office, showed up with Alara and a squad of Thornhaven guards, informed the current director,
a man named Corvin who'd worked for Kale for 4 years, that his services were no longer needed. Corvin didn't take it well. "You can't just walk in here and fire me," he said, face red. "I report to Alpha Draven. Alpha Draven no longer has authority over Concord operations." Leora kept her voice level. "I do. And I'm informing you that your position is terminated effective immediately."
"On whose authority?" "The Council's. Mine. Take your pick." Leora gestured to the guards. "You can leave voluntarily, or they'll escort you. Your choice." Corvin looked like he wanted to fight. Then he looked at the armed soldiers behind Leora and thought better of it. "This isn't over," he said as he gathered his things. "Kyle will come back. And when he does, he'll find a system that actually works instead of the mess he's been coasting on for years." Leora held the door open. "Goodbye, Corvin." She repeated that scene 6 more times over the next 2 days. Each dismissal got a little easier. Each replacement brought someone Leora had vetted, someone who actually understood the technical work instead of just following Kyle's orders. But it also made enemies. Fast. On the 4th day, someone tried to kill her. Leora was crossing the council grounds, heading to yet another meeting, when an arrow slammed into the wall 6 inches from her head. She dropped instantly, training from months of running kicking in. Alara was there a second later, blade drawn, shouting for guards. The archer was gone by the time they secured the area. Professional, clean, the kind of hit that said someone had paid good money. "That's it," Alara was furious. "You're not leaving secured areas without a full escort." No arguments. "I can't do my job from behind a wall of guards." "You can't do your job if you're dead." Alara grabbed her arm. "Leora, this is serious. Someone just tried to assassinate you, in broad daylight, on council grounds. That's not a random attack. That's a message." "From who? Kyle?" "Maybe. Or from someone who wants the old power structure back." Alara's expression was grim. "You're disrupting a system that's kept certain people very comfortable. They're going to fight back." She was right. Leora knew she was right. But the reality of it, that people literally wanted her dead for trying to fix what Kyle had broken, made her want to scream. Instead, she nodded. "Fine. Full escort. But I'm not stopping. We're too close to having this functional again." The breakthrough came on the 6th day. Leora was reviewing personnel files when she found it, a discrepancy in the financial records. Small, barely noticeable, but once she started pulling the thread, the whole thing unraveled. Kale hadn't just been taking credit for her work. He'd been stealing from the Concord treasury, systematically, for years. "Look at this." Leora spread the documents across the table. Mira, Alara, and Sarah Silverpine, who'd become an unexpected ally, leaned in. "Resource allocations to Ironhold every quarter, like clockwork, labeled as administrative overhead." "That's normal," Sarah said. "Every pack contributes to central operations. Except the amounts don't match the actual expenses." Leora pulled out her calculations. "The communication office costs 12,000 marks per year to run. Kale's been billing the Concord 18,000. The Enforcement Bureau costs 25,000. He's been billing 40. Mira's eyes widened. He's been pocketing the difference. For 5 years. Leora's hands were shaking with fury. "I thought he was just lazy. Just taking credit without doing work. But he was actively stealing. From every pack in the Alliance." "How much total?" Sarah's voice was quiet. Leora had already done the math. "Conservative estimate? 200,000 marks, probably more." The silence was absolute. "That's enough to start a war," Sarah said finally. "Or buy an army, or—" She stopped. "Or hire every professional killer in the borderlands to eliminate a threat." They all looked at each other. "He's not running," Alara said. "He's preparing, using stolen money to build something." "We need to tell the council," Mira said. "We need to find Kyle first." Leora stood. "Because if he's been embezzling this much, he's not going to let me expose it. He'll come after me before I can present this evidence." "Let him come." Sarah's smile was cold. "We'll be ready." They presented the evidence to the council that afternoon. The reaction was immediate and explosive. Vasek Razorfin actually threw a chair. 200,000 marks? Other alphas were shouting, demanding answers, calling for Kyle's immediate arrest. The orderly council session dissolved into rage, and recrimination. Marcus finally restored order by literally threatening to clear the hall at sword point. "This changes everything," he said, voice hard. "This isn't just about taking credit for Leora's work. This is theft, betrayal of the entire Concord." He looked around the circle.